We are in Acts chapter 25 today, and we're almost to the end. Acts chapter 28 is, of course, the last chapter in Acts. And here we see that Paul is still imprisoned at Caesarea, and we've got a new Roman governor, Festus, is on the scene. And chapter 25 is really, we get a look at politics, and we see how is it that Paul gets to Rome, and or how is this journey going to begin? What are the means of this anyway? So in the first 5 verses, we see that Festus, the new Roman governor, makes it to the area, and he visits Jerusalem. Of course, he wants to have a good relationship with the Jewish representatives and the leaders, and so he visits Jerusalem. Now, while he's there, he learns that the Sanhedrin, the Jewish leadership, still want Paul dead. So it's been 2 years that Paul has been imprisoned in Caesarea, and they still want him dead. And so they ask for Paul to be brought to Jerusalem, and because they want to ambush him. Right? The New American Standard rightly puts the end of verse 3 in parentheses because they've still got this plot to get rid of him. Here, just a special remark is do things in the right way. So the Jewish leadership, they want Paul out of the way, but they're willing to take any means necessary. Sometimes we think that the ends justify the means. As Christians, that is not how we operate. We do things the right way, above reproach. There's a right way to do things, and there's a wrong way to do things. We are not going to use ungodly methods to pursue godly ends. And let this be a reminder to us, because Luke is making sure to contrast these Jewish leaders with Paul. Now, when we go to verses 6 through 12, we can see that Paul does not want to go to Jerusalem because he knows what's up. He knows what's going to happen to him on the way. And he rightly appeals to Caesar because that's his right as a Roman citizen. And even if Festus hears his case and decides a verdict, Paul can still appeal to Caesar after that. And so Paul says, I want to be heard by Caesar. And Festus goes through the motions and says, okay, you're going to be heard by Caesar. So then, in verses 13 through 22, we get a new character who comes on the scene. This is Agrippa. Now, this is Agrippa the second. This is a Herod. This is Herod Agrippa the second. Of course, Herod being more of a title. This Agrippa is the great-grandson of Herod the Great, who is alive when Jesus is born, and he is the son of Herod Agrippa the first, who we met earlier in Acts. And Bernice is his sister, and they had a special relationship, the kind of relationship that a brother and a sister should not have. And he has jurisdiction kind of in the northeast part of Palestine, and Festus talks to him because he's got knowledge of the Jews. He knows their customs. He knows what's going on. This is one of the reasons the Romans, he's useful to the Romans. And so Festus lets him know about Paul's case because Festus just doesn't have as much knowledge in this area, and he's looking for some insight. Now in verse 20 here, we see a key verse that helps us understand that all of the first Christians believed that Jesus had rose from the dead. This is not some invention that comes later. This is the testimony of the disciples. This is the testimony of the apostles. It's the testimony of the Apostle Paul in his writings that they genuinely believed that Jesus was resurrected, that the tomb was empty. This is beyond debate that they believe this. And any credible scholar, any credible historian, anyone who's actually looked at the information that we have has to come to this conclusion that the Christians really believed that Jesus had rose from the dead. It is the core, the foundation of Christianity. So if you're here on the blogosphere or some random place on the internet, or somebody says, that's an invention. It's not. All of the evidence points to this. And Bart Ehrman, who is a skeptic and an atheist, and has written a lot of books, he concludes that they really believe that Jesus rose from the dead. Now, you can disagree with that belief. You cannot believe that, but you cannot disagree with the fact that they really believed it. And here we have that admission in verse 20 as well. That's very, very important. That's not a later invention to Christianity. That was from the beginning. Now, in verses 23 through 27, we see that Paul is brought before the court in Caesarea. That Festus has got Agrippa and the Roman officials and the leaders of the soldiers, and he's got everybody. They're all in their fancy clothes, and he brings Paul out and says, "Hey, I kind of don't know what to do with this guy. I got to send him to Caesar, but I don't have anything charges to write against him, and I've got to send some kind of charges so that Caesar can make a decision." And so then we stop, because in verse 26 is when Paul speaks. But here we can see the contrast between Paul, who's been imprisoned and is, not important, he's insignificant, and all of this pomp and circumstance. And the Caesar at this time is Nero, who at the beginning of his rule was seen as reliable and balanced, and it's towards the end that he, becomes unhinged and does some crazy things, becomes an enemy of the Christians. But here we see through all these, Paul is working through the political machinations here. Now, for us, what's a good takeaway from us? I think patience. Patience is key to a follower of Jesus, because Paul, for 2 years, he's been sitting in one place. Now, there is some debate among scholars on, did Paul write some of his prison epistles from Caesarea? Did he write Ephesians from Caesarea? Did he write Colossians from Caesarea? Did he write Philippians from Caesarea? And it's most likely that he wrote those from Rome, his later imprisonment in Rome, but he, as is evidenced by his ministry, Paul is never inactive, but he's in one place, and he's got to be patient, because he's just waiting on the justice system, the very slow system, to kind of decide his fate. But he has to be very patient, but he does not give up, and he does not give up being a witness for Jesus Christ. And that is a example to us, and should inspire and motivate us to be patient and to remain faithful, even if we're kind of like a weird limbo. And maybe some of us right now feel like we're in this weird kind of limbo. We can be patient, we can endure, because God can empower and strengthen us through the Spirit to endure, and to endure faithfully.